UN and Afghanistan's Taliban, figuring out how to interact. It's been little more than a month since Kalashnikov-toting Taliban fighters in their signature heavy beards, high-top sneakers and shalwar kameezes descended on the Afghan capital and cemented their takeover. Now they are vying for a seat in the Club of Nations and seeking what no country has given them as they attempt to govern for a second time: international recognition of their rule. The Taliban wrote to the United Nations requesting to address the UN General Assembly meeting of leaders that is underway in New York. They argue they have all the requirements needed for recognition of a government. The UN has effectively responded to the Taliban's request by signaling, "Not so fast."
Afghanistan, which joined the UN in 1946 as an early member state, is scheduled to speak last at the General Assembly Leaders' Session on Monday. With no meeting yet held by the UN committee that decides challenges to credentials, it appears almost certain that Afghanistan's current ambassador will give the address this year, or that no one will at all.
The UN can withhold or bestow formal acknowledgement on the Taliban, and use this as crucial leverage to exact assurances on human rights, girls' access to education and political concessions. This is where the power and relevance, even, of the 76-year-old world body still holds. Afghanistan is a good, and perhaps extreme, representative case study of precisely why the United Nations was founded in the aftermath of World War II, said Rohinton Medhora, president of the Center for International Governance Innovation in Canada. If you're the UN and you want to represent the family of nations, then you want absolutely everyone of the family there, even the distant cousin that not everyone's proud of, he said. So the UN needs Afghanistan and countries to demonstrate the value of many of its operations. In Afghanistan, the United Nations can deploy the weight of its vast aid and development programs to show just how crucial its often underfunded agencies are in providing stability and security. The country is facing multiple humanitarian crises and near total poverty due to fallout from the political situation. There are already growing calls for aid to be contingent on ensuring girls' access to education. Despite promises to be inclusive and open, the Taliban have yet to allow older girls back to school, have curtailed local media freedoms and returned to brutal practices like publicly hanging dead bodies in city squares. Taliban does not represent the will of the Afghan people, Afghanistan's currently accredited ambassador to the UN in Geneva, Nasir Ahmadi Shah, told the Associated Press. If the United Nations recognizes the Taliban's claim to power, Ahmadi Shah said, then it sends a corrosive message to others, be it in Yemen or in Myanmar, that they can take up guns, create violence, join with US-designated terrorist groups. I think for the world, for the United Nations, it's time to use this as a leverage, Ahmadi Shah said. The Taliban's appointed UN representative, Suhail Shaheen, a former negotiator and political spokesman, told the Associated Press that his government should be admitted into the Club of Nations and that all borders, territory, and major cities of Afghanistan are in our control. We have support of our people, and because of their support, we were able to continue a successful struggle for independence of our country which culminated in our independence, he said. We have all the requirements needed for recognition of a government. So we hope the UN as a neutral world body recognize the current government of Afghanistan. More than a dozen ministers in the all-Taliban cabinet are on a UN blacklist, including the group's foreign minister, Ahmadi Shah, and other Afghan diplomats abroad are refusing to speak to. Ahmadi Shah was serving in Geneva under the US-backed government of Ashraf Ghani when the president fled Afghanistan August 15 to seek refuge in the United Arab Emirates as the Taliban encircled the capital. Ghani's government swiftly fell thereafter. Ahmadi Shah is still holding meetings with representatives from countries around the world, imploring them to push for the resuscitation of intra-Afghan peace talks. He wants the United Nations to make clear that joining its ranks is not only about holding a country under the barrels of your guns and having enough population taken hostage. Meanwhile, Qatar has urged countries not to boycott the Taliban, and Pakistan called on nations to avoid isolating the Taliban, and to incentivize them to hold to their promises of renouncing terrorism and being inclusive. During the Taliban's repressive time in power in the late 1990s, only Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates recognized their legitimacy. During that era, the UN refused to recognize their government and gave Afghanistan's seat to the previous, warlord-dominated government. The group was then ousted from power in 2001 by a US-led coalition after the 9/11 attacks for harboring al-Qaeda. The United States, which withdrew all its forces from the country last month in a chaotic airlift that ended America's forever war, says it is critical that the international community remains united in ensuring the Taliban meets a range of commitments before granting legitimacy or support beyond humanitarian aid. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this is the message he delivered to the UN Security Council and others on the sidelines of the General Assembly this week. The US has significant leverage when it comes to the Taliban, State Department spokesman Ned Price told reporters Friday. But we have all the more leverage when we work in coordination and in harmony with our allies and partners around the globe, he added. Med Hora, of the Center for International Governance Innovation, said the UN has levers it can use through its various agencies, such as UNICEF, which focuses on children, UNHCR, which assists refugees, and the World Food Programme, all where the actual work of the UN gets done. This is another area where the United States has major sway as the largest donor to the United Nations, contributing nearly 1/5 of funding for the body's collective budget in 2019, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. In multiple UN speeches this past week, a number of world leaders mentioned Afghanistan, including US President Joe Biden and Afghanistan's neighbors, such as Pakistan, Iran, and Uzbekistan. Inayat Majafizada, who runs an independent think tank in Kabul that monitors security issues in Afghanistan's provinces, said the UN should also facilitate negotiations between Afghan groups and bring the various countries with a history of meddling in the nation on board for the sake of regional security.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.